Hello, my friends. Sorry for the tardiness. Running around New York is time-consuming. About 10 minutes late. I hope everybody survived the Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp meltdown yesterday. Hope everybody is enjoyed the time off. We'll grab Jon on here in a second. Got lots of good questions. A lot of people asking questions. We're getting more repeats every week, so please go to the YouTube Live with Matt Rad Clips channel where we've answered lots and lots of questions. I'm still going to hit people back in DMs with specific answers about things, but please check out the Live with Matt Rad Clips channel. It's the same content that's on the Live with Matt Rad Instagram, but you can search. So there's lots of topics we've covered. I'm happy to DM people and gently remind them and send them videos, but lots of repeat questions we're getting every week. I'll just grab Jon right now. Hey.
What up?
Oh, man, just running around like a madman. Your head is so big. You're so close to the...
It's so funny, like the week I choose to take a break from Instagram, like it breaks. And then I come back and everything is about how Instagram doesn't work. What happened?
Yeah. I don't know enough. I read some technical analysis of someone who also didn't know enough about it. It has something to do with how ISPs talk to each other, and Facebook, the conglomerate, I guess, is its own ISP. I'm sure someone in the chat will correct me, but there's some way in which they all connect, and that language got screwed up, and therefore Facebook and WhatsApp and everything just all went down at once. I guess to the point where Facebook employees' key cards wouldn't even work, so they couldn't get into the building to fix the problem.
Wow. So it's really deep.
Yeah, apparently they say it wasn't malicious, but who knows?
Yeah,
who knows about anything these days? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I had a nice workout this morning. First in a while. I had a break from working out, which is lame because all the traveling and then came back, so much work and didn't have any time to exercise. And then I was supposed to play tennis this morning and it was raining, so the courts were wet. So I went to the gym. I lifted some weights. And
that's great, man.
Did some mixed notes, and here we are. How's
the back and new weightlifting and stretching and alignment stuff all progressing? Because, you had, for those that don't know, you had years, you had an accident, you had years of back stuff, but now you've been able to open it up and do deadlifts for the first time, things like that. How are you doing?
It's actually pretty cool that you asked me, because a lot of the things I did today, you taught me.
Hey,
that
really?
one hang at your place. Yeah, I did some kettlebell like lifts where you start down in squat position and reach up. I did that today. I did pull-ups today. I did all compound movements today.
Nice.
Super cool. A lot of it was between you and my physical therapist, Glenn Gomez, just understanding where to hinge. And I don't have any back pain when I hinge properly and lift properly. I don't do extremely heavy weights at all.
No, you don't need to.
Don't need to. Just I really care about form. But I did something. I did pull-ups, dips back to back. Today was so intense and felt really good. So, I don't know. My back's fine. The only time it hurts is when I drive long distances in the car.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry that the stream went away because somebody called me. I thought my shit was on silent. I don't know why that happens, but that's great, man. That's great to hear. And I want to give a shout out, as always, to the Discord community. There's a whole health section in there, and there's been great discussion about everything from micronutrients to stretching to workout stuff and mental health. So I encourage everybody to go check out the Discord. It's become a cool community. There's somebody who joined yesterday who I try to always say hi when people introduce themselves. I haven't done that yet because things have been chaotic, but this person jumped on, and there was already a great thread with Kian and a bunch of other people talking about mixing, talking about saturation, talking about compression, and the person who joined was like, wow, already this is awesome. This is such a great resource for just conversation about how to do what we do. And it's everything from mixing and some of the stuff we talk about on here to general life stuff. People are showing their studio setups. There's lots of advice on there about building studios. It's been a really cool spot. At some point, we'll sneak you on there. Not that you need another thing to add to your repertoire, far, but maybe you can join with me when I come back to LA. We can have a nice little, we can go on the Discord together. People will appreciate it. Baines has been on there. There's a bunch of people jumping on there and saying hi. So shout out to the Discord.
I'm going to jump on and put everybody in check on what they're saying, because I have no idea what's being said on there.
No, it's great. It's honestly, it's lots of, what's great about it is, you and I think have, at least in this little community, opened up the conversations and this ethos of just sharing what we know. Discord link, the Live with Matt Rad Instagram. Go to the Live with Matt Rad Instagram, and the link is in the bio there. If somebody in the chat wants to throw it up there, you can do that. But open up this idea of people sharing information and just saying everything we know, because we're not at this place in our lives, we've talked about this before, where we've all right, we're experts, we know everything, blah, blah, blah. We're all in the process of learning. And a big part of the reason you and I started this is because we just like talking about making records. And now that we've kind of put it out into the world, there's, I think, 550 people on the Discord. It's really active, and people just helping and sharing and showing ideas. And, hey, I found this trick, and hey, why is this happening? And then 3 other people chime in with a bunch of research. It's really dope to see. And I encourage everybody to go check it out, because it's definitely what we're all about. Just helping people, asking questions, that sort of thing.
On that note, not needing one more thing to do, I mentioned just in the beginning that for the first time ever, I took a week. I think it's been a week break from Instagram, like not looking at it at all. Mostly just to see what other things I chase dopaminergically, like what kind of dopamine chases I'm going for outside of Instagram. And what I really noticed was just more productivity and more focus and lack of distraction when it came to work this week, because work this week was a lot because I was away for a while and then kind of in and out before New York after Paris. I didn't really have a chance to dig my teeth back in. And I think I had, like 13 or 14 mixes come in last week, and I got through most of them, and a lot of them were really dynamic records and really beautiful records, and really needed care, not just kind of a little just make it a more clear version of this. Like a lot of them were really, really creative mixes, and I was really focused, and I was able to still do things pretty quickly with intent, but I noticed I wasn't checking other things. Like I think the only distractions I had was dehydration and needing to drink water, which was really cool. Like, not that I don't necessarily check my Instagram much during work, but I know I do it enough because I think it's a break. Like, let me just see what's going on here. But I think Sam Harris talked about this on one episode, that the amount of time neurologically it takes to get back to the task at hand even when a small distraction occurs, like looking at Instagram or even email. It doesn't have to be social media, but any sort of communication otherwise, it actually there's a threshold for getting back into what you were doing, in some sort of short-term memory of what was I even doing again. So I noticed a minimization of all that distraction from not doing Instagram, and for just for data's sake, my average for people that want to be concerned with this at all for themselves, I think my average was about 38 to 42 minutes a day. So besides Tuesday with you, which is at least usually like an hour and 15
of Instagram.
Of Instagram. So I'm not doing it extremely throughout the day, but it was enough that I wanted to just see, like, okay, well, can I take 40 minutes and not do that? And where is it going to go? And it went all into focus on work, which in a busy week is more easy to do than on a slower week. And then I'll have to adjust and understand where that time goes otherwise. But I thought it was important to mention that I was kind of doing this experiment.
Well, it's cool to hear that, and it's there's sort of two things: one that people talk about, and one that I think people talk about less, which is maybe a bit to your point. One, obviously, that you're just scrolling through nonsense. Your monkey mind, mild dopamine hits. You post something, you're waiting for likes. We all do that. I spend way too much time on Instagram. I also love interacting with people on Instagram. Don't want to stop that. Haven't figured out how to balance that well. I think all of our brains are not very well evolved to what is essentially brain sugar. But the other thing that's interesting that I've been thinking about more recently is the idea of multitasking kind of being bullshit. Certainly people can do lots of different things, but to actually be focused and go deep and do the kind of work that you and I are trying to do, and presumably lots of the people that are trying to watch this, you can't have part of your focus get pulled away periodically. You can't have those little like, oh, I got to do this other thing. Now I'm going to get back to this 10 minutes later. I'm just going to do it and then come back to this. Just the fact that you're pulling away from it actually really is to the detriment of the work that you're doing. And we don't have a lot of modern, other than meditation, which we talk about a lot, there aren't a lot of good tools pulling in the opposite direction of the social media sort of brain sugar stuff. And it's very distracting for those of us that, a lot of our social life, but a lot of our professional life, there's lots of interactions with people. You keep in touch with lots of people, and you just get into that habit where you're working on something and you're like, oh, I need a little break. And then you turn here. Your work is going to suffer instead of like walking outside and coming back or something like that.
Yeah, so there's an easy experiment that I also heard, ironically, while listening to a podcast, but they were talking about the best way to look at this is if you're driving a car and you're listening to a podcast, notice when you need to step on the brake to alert yourself to an oncoming car stopping short in front of you. You will not remember the sentence that was said during the time where you hit the brake, because that takes over. Top-down control takes over and says, I need to pay attention to the car in front of me. So there's no way to multitask, like you're saying. There's actually like biological evidence for that. Can you hear the gist of what's going on and drive the car? Of course. You can hear most of the important things if you're cruising along slowly in a meditative state while driving. But the minute that you have to engage in some sort of defense, that's why when you get hungry, you start to lose focus, right? There's a certain threshold of fasting where you're alert. And then it comes to I'm really tired and I really need food right now. And the cognitive, capacity goes down because your survival mechanism kicks in and says, I need to eat right now, right? So there's no real true multitasking. To answer Bradley's question, he said, do I think I'll go back into using it after this break? I spent 5 minutes on it right now because you were running late. And just checking what I missed. And then I realized it's all the same. I didn't miss anything. Someone else released a song. Someone else made some food. I made food this morning too. I did miss some messages that maybe I were relevant at the time. But if this starts happening more, then people will reach out to me through text message or other forms of communication if something is dire or super cool. So I don't actually know. I felt weird looking back at it today for 5 to 10 minutes. So no, I'm going to do another week. But what I did text Matt yesterday is I'm going to use it on Tuesdays for this and on Fridays for release days. See what's going on, who's putting out music, what music I put out. Lack of credits on platforms requires producers, writers, engineers, artists to promote their music and what they're working on through Instagram, which, for better or for worse, it is what it is. So I'll probably check in twice a week. But it felt really good and I didn't crave it after 2 days. It's like, it's probably like some sort of physical addiction, right? I don't have the exact data there, but after 2-3 days, I didn't even want to look. I think the first day or two, I caught myself because I don't have, I have only Siri recommended apps on the front of my iPhone. And I've for the last year or two, I've had Siri don't suggest Instagram. So I have to type it in the search bar to even get to the app. So I've had that boundary for I think a year or two now, but I caught myself typing it in once or twice in the first 2 days, and I didn't do that at all for the last 5.
That's interesting. I've done various barriers, put up various barriers for myself to help me not check Instagram, and my brain kind of always finds a way to circumvent those barriers. I think, I don't have a good answer. I don't think anybody does. I mean, I assume most people watch The Social Dilemma, that Netflix doc, or have listened to podcasts with some version of it. It's just really hard.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to demonize it completely. I completely agree with the fact that you connect with people.
We're on the platform right now.
Yeah,
and
there's
a beautiful thing that I think is happening because we're able to do this. But it definitely can suck a lot of your time and your life. And back to the, focusing on making records, uninterrupted focus time is super, super undervalued. I undervalue it. I think almost everybody I know undervalues it, to actually just turn off and focus on something. And even if that means you need to take a break, you walk around, you get a glass of water, you don't get some other input to distract yourself, but take a break that doesn't involve having more brain sugar. It will make your records better. You will be more efficient. You will be, I think, happier. but who the fuck knows? I mean, that's at least what's worked for me.
I would recommend the book, The Molecule of More. I'm reading that right now. That's kind of where I'm getting all this information outside of the Huberman Labs podcast. That really does a deep dive. And I think 2 episodes ago was strictly on dopamine and the difference between dopamine and serotonin, and the search for more, and serotonin being the calming chemical that lets you be in the here and now, and like happy with what you have, and not constantly searching and looking for more things. So I forgot the author's name. It's to the left of me and I could go get it, but The Molecule of More is the book. And it's a cool little deep dive. I'm almost halfway through the book into just really what's going on under the hood, and not demonizing it. We need it. You know, we need dopamine. We need to search for rewards. We need to have goals for the future, to find food, for a lot of reasons. But it's nice to know the mechanisms that are occurring inside of us. And then, it talks about control, dopamine versus seeking reward, dopamine. Desire dopamine versus control, and understanding the two when they're at play.
The last thought, and then we'll jump over to some questions and things. Fury drip here. Just hide your phone and go out without it, but we have to be reachable. I don't think that's really true. I think, I don't know how old a lot of the people are watching this, but you and I are basically of the last generation that lived some significant part of our life and have real memories before there were cell phones. And it turns out that things are fine and you'll be fine. I mean, there are occasional life emergencies, but those things you generally, everybody thinks, oh, they need to reach me now. What happens now? Everybody's always in it needs to happen now, especially A&Rs and managers and artists. Everybody wants it. But the reality is, if you're not available for 4 or 5 hours because your phone hasn't been around, it's not the end of the world. I've never been in a situation where that's cost me a gig or screwed something up. And
I have once or twice, and it's just okay, you couldn't wait 4 or 5 hours to hear back from me. That's lame. This is nothing. Nothing cool about that. You waited because that means the whole project is fucked up. I
was gonna say, if that's the case, the benefit is probably still outweighs it.
Yes,
being able to be sane.
Yeah. So I completely agree with you. I'm of a time where that wasn't required, and I'm dealing with it. It's a struggle, honestly, because I want to be responsive when it comes to work. I want to be responsive when it comes to relationships, but I also know my boundaries, and I definitely need time without staring at this thing and communicating. That's the only way I'm going to be as good as I can be at every part of me. So
absolutely.
So finding the balance is important.
Yeah, I totally agree. We talk about it a lot. I wanted to jump into a few questions. There's been lots of chatter, both in my DMs and then on the Discord, about backups, because my computer took a shit 12 days ago, and the only aspect of backups I did not have was a bootable clone, because as I mentioned last week, I had a backup computer when I was in LA, and I just didn't think everything through, and paid the price of losing 10 or 11 days of time. But I do have Backblaze cloud backup. I have everything in the cloud. So I was able to get whatever data I needed, was still able to be productive on the studio that I'm renting. Has a computer that's a great studio computer, just doesn't have all my specs. But I see a lot of people going in and finally doing some serious backup, whether it's getting little SSD drives to travel with for hardware backups, or doing Backblaze or some other cloud backup service. And I just want to say, good, all of you do it. Do make sure your shit is all backed up, because if it's not, at some point you'll wish it was, because it happens to everybody, and you really, 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 really need to be. That's, we talked about it, I think, very early on in some of these conversations, that the skill set of making a snare drum sound good, or getting your mix to be loud, and all those things are fine and great, but the thing that separates the professionals from the amateurs, or separates the people who get consistent work from everybody else, is being organized, not losing sessions, having everything ready to go, and being reliable. And one of the big things for that is backups. So I just wanted to say that as a manifesto. Make sure everybody, I know you have
100% accurate
many backup systems. Do you want to go over one more time what your backup?
Time machine all the time, backing up the internal, that is bootable as well, a backup of that, and then
so multiple backups of your main system.
Yep, 2, and then archive drives with a backup of that. So and every 500 gigs, because I have a 2 terabyte internal, I use 1 terabyte probably of it just so it runs smoothly. My computer has very few issues. I keep it pretty clean. I think Josh, every 500 to 700 gigabytes, drags it over to an 8 terabyte backup drive, and we have a backup of that 8 terabyte, and we have like 4 of those for all the work we've done.
That sounds great.
8 hard drives, I guess.
You have 25 hard drives of backups.
Yeah. But I go all the way back to 20. I go all the way back to, almost my Long Island days. I don't have all of what was on Long Island on double backed up drives, but I definitely have those drives if I really had to get a SATA toaster thing to put them in. I probably have everything I've ever worked on. All the way back to 2005, I think, probably. I
think I'm pretty close to that. I think I have barring a few times when I've lost stuff because I didn't have a cloud backup or I wasn't doing a consistent enough deep backup and one of my drives failed. But I definitely
I don't have a cloud backup, by the way.
Interesting. I think you should, by the way.
Deliverables, and I have stems and stuff there, but I don't. Yeah, I was skeptical on it at a time. I don't think I'm skeptical anymore, so it's probably worth doing.
Do you have copies not in your current place?
No.
Better keep those candles away from wood.
Yeah.
Should do a cloud backup.
Yeah.
This is. I'm encouraging you to Josh. Cloud backup.
Josh, cloud backup time.
It's like $100 a year, and it'll take you a month for it to all upload into the cloud because you have many terabytes, but then it's there forever.
Yeah, I don't want to do it in Dropbox. I don't like Dropbox in that sense on the computer when it runs in real time. It's the only thing that causes glitches on the computer. So I don't use it for that. So we'll talk about what you do use.
Backblaze. That's the one that I use. I know Kian uses.
Backblaze.
Dave Rosen, who's a film composer, used to be in that band, The Parlor Mob, old friend of mine. He uses that at last I checked. Basically, when I looked around, both Kian and my film composer friend both used it. Fuck cool. Dropbox. I've had weird stuff with Dropbox too. I find it glitchy or something about it. Although I was just talking to my buddy Danny Harl, and he says he does everything with Dropbox. So
a lot of people do.
I'm sure it works for some people. And I may look into it, but Backblaze. Cool. Cool. Somebody asked, who is it? Hex asked, what are the computer specs? I don't know if we've answered this before. I feel like maybe we did, but I use a MacBook Pro i9. Let me see. I'm actually going to look at it right now. I just got it back. I run Catalina because I don't want to. I've been told by a lot of the experts on the Discord that not everything is perfectly working up on Big Sur, which I think is the new one. So I have Catalina. It's a 8-core Intel i9. I guess it's 2.4 gigahertz, 64 gigs of RAM, and 2 terabyte internal. And I run everything off externals. I don't record to the internal drive or anything like that because whatever Thunderbolt, USB 3C, whatever is more than fast enough for all the stuff that I do. So that's what I'm using. What about you?
Yeah, I have an iMac Pro, 10 or 12 core with a shit ton of RAM and 2 terabyte flash drive. So I do work off the internal and archive to external. But 2 terabytes of flash is so fucking fast. So I rarely have problems. There's some glitchy plugins that happen, but my computer has been good for 5 years, and still better than most computers that I go to another studio and experience. Yeah, very few crashes and playback stops and whatever.
People are asking what hard drives I have. I think it's the Samsung T5 or T7.
That's what I have too.
Yeah, 2 terabyte.
Yeah. That's my backup that runs in real time. That's the same. Yeah. The T7 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, it's a great place to go ask on the Discord. There's lots of very knowledgeable people on there, but the consensus seems to be that the new Macs with the M1 chips, not everything quite works beautifully on them. So if you are a person like John or I or many of the people watching this, where you're working on lots of different projects and you have old projects you need to pick up, old projects, sessions you need to open, things like that. It seems to be that both Big Sur and the M1 chips are not maybe not quite perfect for everything. Bradley, Slow Hand Sound on here was saying there was an issue with Waves with the M1 chips. Maybe I may be misremembering, but again,
you can just uninstall Waves. You don't need Waves.
John doesn't need Waves. I like Waves.
What,
like,
really? What do you like?
There's a couple things.
What do you like?
What do I like with Waves? There's a trick I like to do with the Super Tap, because it has particular parameters for delay, for widening vocals. There's a few other plugins I like for it. Oh, Bradley says it's solved for Waves. But go on the Discord, ask more questions. Yeah, there's a few Waves. There's a few Waves plugins that I like.
Let's play the Waves game. Let me give you another option. Let's play it. Let's go.
Okay. So Waves. This is the Waves game. This is our first time playing the Waves game. I like the Waves Super Tap because I like the individual control and panning abilities and spatial panning placement of the individual delays, and you can do up to 6. And so there's interesting filtered, putting it as an insert on a lead vocal. There's cool stuff that I like to do with that for widening the vocal.
Okay, so what if, I was going to kill it, H3000, or templates and recallability of inserts. Now you could take 4 minutes and make that with 4 delay plugins or 6 delay plugins that sound cooler and better, filter them like the way the Valhalla delay, send them all to a bus and on a folder track, and just import that right away on one thing in a template.
But it's also easier to just have one insert. And
it is, but what if it doesn't sound as good as the other ones?
I guess I would have to go through that and try that. But it's a pretty simple effect for widening that sounds pretty good to me.
What about H3000?
H3000 is good. It doesn't have the same panning ability for each delay, each piece of the delay. I don't know how to describe it. But
it makes the vocal wide, so it just does the job for you.
And I use that too, but maybe I don't want it to sound exactly like the H3000. I also haven't dug into all the programming of it yet, but I like the idea of being able to place exactly into space with an EQ individual delays for. It's just, there's like 4 or 5 different ways I like widening vocals. Right. I like microshift. I like H3000.
Okay. So Waves Game Episode 2. Give me another one.
I like the Millennium Verb preset on True Verb. It's a classic,
good,
2000 eras pop thing, and I have not found something that sounds exactly like it. And
Shimmer.
Shimmer's good, not the same. Doesn't quite
make
do
it
the same
better.
Thing. Yeah, part of these two are production tools, where it's like I have a thing, I know what it does, it works great, and I could go in and find another plugin and try to recreate it.
The game will be played for other people to not go to Waves to use. You can still use Waves. You're doing great work using Waves.
Okay, good.
So the game is for other people to find other solutions. Millennium Verb is really great preset, but use Shimmer. I think it's a bit more elegant sounding, the Millennium Verb, and it's I would say there's more flexibility, and the Millennium Verb can potentially sound a little dated and artifacty compared to the smoothness of what the Valhalla guys did with Shimmer.
Yeah, and I like Shimmer. We talked about it last week. I think it's a great plugin. I use it for slightly different things, but it's an amazing plugin.
Waves Game Episode 3.
Waves Game. By the way, we've got 2 in there. I feel proud of myself for saying two Waves plugins that I worked that even if you didn't okay for everyone, you're like, okay, if that works for you, that's fine. What's another Waves plugin? I should really bring up a session. I don't really use that many of them. I like the noise reduction plugins, the X Noise, X Crackle. I'm sure that
Isotope.
I think Isotope has a great one. I haven't used it, but I should switch to that.
Way better.
Fine.
That's a must. That's a you actually can't use the Waves one anymore. The Isotope is way better than that. The RX. The doubler, I was waiting for Mike Miller to jump in and say doubler. I've been waiting for him to do this the whole time we were talking about Waves. Like, where were you, bro?
Oh, the NS one is good too. And NS, there's a certain vocal template where the noise suppressor is pretty cool. I'm sure there's a million versions of it.
The secret to the Waves game is using the doubler on the bass and taking all the bass out of the center. That's the secret. That's the mix. That's Mix God's secret.
Doubler's not a bad effect. And again, part of what makes really all these plugins, it's like a lot of these companies, a lot of the big plugin companies, you can get essentially the same thing out of all of them. And some of it is just what you're used to and ease of use. Now, if there's something that's much better, it's like, we talk about this a lot with something like CLA vocals, where it's like, okay, people who don't want to spend any time and want to get sound and do that.
There's nothing better than CLA vocals. It's the best plugin ever made.
You heard it here, folks.
Sorry, this is my troll episode.
This is your troll episode. So anyway, that's 3 for the Waves game. Maybe 4? Do we get 4 in the Waves game?
No, you do 3.
Okay.
Oh, you're talking about CLA. Sure. All right, we'll give you 4.
I don't get credit for doubler. Somebody else gets credit for that?
That's Mike Miller gets credit for the doubler game. Yeah.
Shout out Mike Miller. All right, well, that's enough of the Waves game. I can't come up with any more right now.
Okay, cool. New question.
New question. And I'll bring one up for next week so we can have a little more of the Waves game. Let's see. You want to jump into a heavy one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, MX. Maybe the name is MX? I don't know. That's what I wrote down. MX. How do you deal, and I think there's a lot to talk about here. How do you deal with talented artists with substance abuse problems? And I think actually that can even be a larger, well, there's specific stuff there, which some of which we are very much unqualified to talk about as non-medical professionals or addiction medicine specialists or whatever. Certainly burping ramen. Certainly, we've both dealt with lots of people in the music industry who are users of various substances, perhaps to their own detriment. I think there's also a larger conversation here about talented artists who can't get it together for whatever reason, whether it's their own mental health, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's some other form of self-sabotage. The first thing I'll say about it is it happens a lot. Because it tends to be that people who are out on the fringes are the people who are both perhaps more predisposed to making interesting art and doing things that are unexpected or difficult to do. People have to be convicted in a certain way to do interesting art oftentimes. And those people are also, a higher percentage of them are predisposed to mental illness, drug addiction, things like that. So it's something that is very, very common. I don't think there is an easy answer. But I don't know. Do you have any initial thoughts on that question? Is it something you've dealt with much? Have you thought about it? I mean, yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah, not having as many attended sessions and not producing and writing in the room makes a lot of that go away for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know what people are doing when they're sending me mix notes, or even when I'm FaceTiming them about a mix. So I have a boundary between this, but in the past, it's hard to not let it affect you if you have any sort of compassion and empathy, which most humans do, and most creative types do, most artists do, most people that understand artists do. So it's very hard to let it not affect you, to not let it affect you. But people are going to be them. And they're going to make the decisions. And a lot of people seem to need to learn the hard way. So there's nothing you can really do about it. You're not going to be the one that takes away their vice or whatever their interest is, their addiction is. You're not going to, take alcohol away and say, you can't drink in my house and make it a big deal, or in the studio. If they're an alcoholic, they're going to find a way to drink without you. Is it affecting the product? Is it affecting your relationship with that person? Then it's a deeper conversation needs to happen. You need to talk about your boundaries and how it affects you. And, maybe not in the control room, not while we're doing this, not, no parties in the studio when this part's occurring. Like, you're not killing the vocals because you got 15 people in the room and, you're putting on a show, but you're not thinking about the details. You're not focused. Like, maybe we need to, separate the socialization from the work ethic here. I don't know. There's not one way to answer this. Everyone's different. Everyone has their problem. But yeah, I worked with someone very closely that was either an alcoholic or just needed to drink every day. Whatever, it's not for me to say if someone is or not, if they're not getting help for it or acknowledging it themselves. And it was very difficult. There was a bit of a roller coaster circumstance going on in most sessions. And, one day something can be the dopest shit we've ever made. And then the next day, that thing was nothing to that person who were moving on. And I'd be so confused because, wait, what? What do you mean? But that tends to be mental health versus
And those
drug
things
abuse
those things tend to go together. I mean, I've certainly worked with a lot of people who gone in and out of sobriety or in and out of intense drug abuse, other forms of self-sabotage, lots of bipolar or some version of that, where, like you said, this is the greatest thing in the world for a week and then don't hear from them for 3 weeks and they moved on to do something else. I think in terms of one's own mental health as a record maker, it's hard to get used to that. It's always frustrating. Yeah. It's important to, like all the things we talk about, try to get perspective for yourself and not get so emotionally attached to everything that when things don't work out, it destroys your life. Mm-hmm. I think there is a healthy distance from projects like that and people like that, which can often be good. At the same time, I don't know why this was brought up. I was reading something about Lil Wayne online, I think today, and there's this great documentary, I think just called The Carter, but it's about him, the process of making The Carter 3, which was his big album that sold him. It was after his 2 years of crazy mixtape runs, all these features, all these hits, and then he finally put out an album that sold 1 million in the first week in 2009-ish, when nobody was selling albums, and iTunes Store, and then prior to that, Napster and Kazaa and all that, and LimeWire had just eaten away the record industry. He sold 1 million copies, and he made maybe the best work of his life, the best album of his life. And yet, when you watch that documentary, which he initially signed the rights away to, he was very excited about it. Then when it premiered at Sundance, he and his team tried to get it removed, and it was around for a while. And you can find it on the internet. It's fascinating because you see someone deeply addicted to drugs, like he's just drinking lean, just drinking syrup all the time, and yet making the best work of his life. Yeah. So what do you make of that? What is your relationship with an artist who maybe they're destroying themselves, but maybe they're destroying themselves and making great art? Maybe that's part of who they are. What is your obligation as a friend, as a collaborator? I mean, there aren't good answers for these. Everything is case by case, not just with the artist, but for your own personality. I know some producers and writers and things that have gone through addiction and sobriety themselves, and they feel more of either because of the program or just because they've been through it, they feel more of an obligation or more of a kinship or empathy with people going through it, and so they insert themselves a little more strongly, and that can be really beautiful. But there isn't really a straightforward answer, but it is something that I think any of us who are making music, whether it's ourselves, our friends, or just people we run into, you're going to deal with a lot more mental health, self-sabotage, addiction. And it's important to, I guess, not get used to it, because you never really get used to destructive behavior, but understand that it's going to be a part of your life, and figuring out how to approach it is, I don't know. It's a constant conversation.
I think there's
battle, I guess.
Yeah, for me, there's another way into it, because I don't feel qualified even remotely discussing how one should handle someone with substance abuse in a creative field that is not your family, that is not a best friend, basically family. Yeah. But at the same time, I simply like to walk the earth, imagining everyone has their own struggle at all times, right? Yeah. So not thinking that everyone's in pain always, but everybody could be in pain always. And should just be as kind to them as possible, as they're being, whoever they are. because there's really no other way to be, because you don't know what's causing someone's struggle and what's causing someone's hurt. So I just want to be kind as often as possible to however you are. Now, like I said earlier, if that encroaches upon my boundaries and my feeling to be able to even do that, which is
or
rare,
your livelihood.
Or your livelihood, then that's another conversation that you should probably bring help into play, whether it's your own therapist or their manager, their team. Hey, have you noticed this about so and so? I'm not sure how to navigate this, but maybe I still want to work with him or her. I want to be involved in this record, but this is how I'm feeling right now. What can we do about this? I wouldn't make it a one-on-one thing unless this person opens up to you about it, because then they feel comfortable. That's happened to me before too. People start getting really open when you're really kind and make people feel comfortable in your space, right? That's a blessing and a curse of the studio being in my home. When I make someone feel really comfortable, they tend to open up about things. Then you hear stories that maybe other people haven't, or maybe this person shares this with everybody. You can't tell. Again, there's no judgment, but you have to figure out how much you want to be involved with someone, on that level of depth. It's a tough one. It's a good question. It's a good question. It's a tricky one to answer, but be kind to people first, and wear your patience as long as possible. And when it's worn thin, don't put it back on them. Walk away from the circumstance and figure it out with some help.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Let's see. Somebody asked about Odriz. I always feel bad because I don't know if I'm saying names right, but Odriz, how should a mixer contract look like, and when should you introduce it in your career? We did 2 full hours about business. Maybe somebody in the chat can shout it out. I think we did 2 hours about it, about how to think about business when you're starting out, the business relationships that John and I have, how and why and when they were built throughout the arc of our careers. The one thing I will say, the 2 things I'll say is, one, when you start talking about contracts, you're talking about attorneys. And so the only way to actually have a contract that means anything is to get a music attorney. Most music attorneys, when you get into a steady stream of work, will work for 5%. That's the standard that almost everybody I know, artists, producers, mixers, whatever, work on. There are hourly for hire lawyers that people will use, but generally once you get to a certain place, that's how the industry is structured. But prior to that, as John and I are not attorneys and therefore cannot give legal advice, the only thing I will say is, so this is not legal advice, as is always said on the internet, get things in writing. And not physical writing, but conversations that you have. Okay, episodes 25 and 26, we talk about business for an hour, so check those out. Check it on the YouTube or wherever you listen or watch. Get things in writing, because a lot of times you'll have phone conversations and then there's no record of what you had agreed on. So at the very least, get things in an email. They're not legally binding, but they certainly are, at least very often, morally binding. Or the one thing I will say is that everybody, I think it is I'm sure Huberman Labs has an episode on this. If not, he probably will at some point. But the idea of memory, everybody remembers things in the past. Everybody tends to remember things in their favor. And so when you're finishing up a project and it's like, hey, I thought we agreed to this. If you got an email, it makes that conversation a whole lot easier. Yeah. So agreeing to terms in an email is actually how all of my deals start. So my management is negotiating with the artist management or the label or whatever, and we get deal terms. Nothing's legally binding, but everybody is working together and everybody has a relationship. So if people go back on something they agreed to, it's bad for their business. So just having something in email, having something in writing, text message is okay too, but email is often better because people lose their texts and it's not in the cloud and you get a new phone and whatever. Email. Those are my thoughts. You got any other thoughts on that? That seems about right.
Ask an attorney, but I think that's about right.
Yeah. Music attorney, and before that, just get things in writing. Eric asked how to help an artist become unattached to a demo mix. We've talked about this a couple times, and Eric, I'll send you the clip of the last time we talked about it. As I've said before, I think the idea of demoitis is kind of a wrong way to think about things. If an artist is emotionally attached to something, figure out what it is that is, you as the professional record maker, figure out what it is that they are attached to and make the best version of that. Because if they're attached to it, it's their record. If you guys get it right, they're the one whose name is on it. They're going to be singing it for 20 years. If an artist is attached to a demo, you as a professional need to figure out what it is about that demo that's great and continue to achieve that as you, I don't know, make it sound better or get a new vocal or whatever. You really need to be focused on what the thing is the artist is attached to, because you're going to go make 1,000 more records. And if they're really lucky, they make a couple albums. So it's really up to them. I mean, there certainly are many times all of us have dealt with, but I made it sound so much better. This is so much better. And then somebody's attached to the demo.
I mean, that also means nothing. I made this better doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's not a sentence worth ever saying. I would relinquish.
It's not your record. Exactly.
Yeah. I would relinquish responsibility of having to back up that statement by not saying it.
You can go, I think this is better, but it's not your record.
Yeah. So I would be careful with that language because I know everyone's doing it. I'm sure I'm guilty of doing it or thinking it. I've never said it in an email. I've never said it in a message. Wait, what do you mean? This is better. It's like,
if somebody goes, which do you like better? You can say, I think this is better. But
exactly.
Trying to argue with an artist and be like, but I made it better and you like the other one. It's like, what are you talking about?
I'm also on this note, I'm very uninterested in attempting to convince someone of something verbally. I like where you're, I want to convince someone that this is what they should release by giving them an option that they can connect to even more than they had. And if I'm not doing that, then I haven't improved their connection. Like you said, it's an emotional connection to something. If I haven't improved it by my demonstration of what I think it could sound like, then I'm not doing my job as good as I can, or we're not the right fit. Either one. I'm not going to say that I sucked every time if it doesn't connect, but I just did something and I was saturating it maybe a little too hard. And the producer wrote back, it sounds like you pumped this one out wrong and it's distorted. And I wrote back, oh, I guess you weren't, feeling the intentional saturation. Like I don't hear it as being wrong, but maybe we're not, here's a cleaner version. I don't like mine better necessarily. If you're not connecting to the amount of saturation that I put on this record, then who cares? Let's clean it up and give you something that you want. Like I didn't once think, I don't want to,
but I still feel that way sometimes. I mean, I think it's as we get older and as we do this more, we relinquish a lot of that. I think that's sort of the point, but I still succumb to it. I'm like, fuck, sure. I really like this better. This version is so much better to me, but it's not my record. And that's the important part. We're here to serve something different than our own egos.
I mean, I felt that on the Little Nas project, some of the mixes they didn't use of mine that they wound up using someone else's mix. Like, I definitely think my mix is better, but they didn't use it. So, okay, it's on my hard drive and no one else will get to hear that. So who cares, on to the next project. But I definitely think I put a better foot forward on them. And I can say that about myself, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to forget about that in the next year. Like I'm not even going to remember that. No one's going to remember that they chose, so-and-so's mix over mine for that record. It just doesn't matter.
And I'll say as a producer, more on the producer writer, and I find that the vast majority of times, and I'd have to actually think about it to what it is, whether it's, 2 out of 3 times, 4 out of 5, 9 out of 10, the majority of times when I'm working on something and they're like, and the artist goes, I liked the original thing better for this and this, whatever I do next makes the song better. Because I've gone another round into it. I've gotten a better perspective on the things that they're attached to. I have I'm more in the artist's head than I was when I did the first version. And ultimately that's what you want to do. On some level, the ideal thing as a producer, for me anyway, most of the time, if I could actually fully get inside the artist's head and then achieve exactly what they want, that's almost that's almost the idea. I mean, it's impossible to do. Maybe when Elon gives us the Neuralink and we can just be in each other's brains, that'll happen. But my skill set is really there to be utilized as a tool for the artists I'm working with. That I know a lot more about making records. I've made a lot more records, but it's their project. And so the more I can get into their head, the better. And almost every time I have to go back and revise something because there's something on an earlier version that they loved, the song gets better. Yeah. The production gets better almost every time.
I would say almost every time that's the case.
Yeah. And sometimes, like you said, you just have different taste, and either you compromise and they like something more than the version that you like, then that's okay, or you don't work together next time or whatever. And those are totally fine as well. The match isn't always perfect in terms of taste.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, if you don't nail the first pass, people communicate that, and then you have another chance. And like you said, you're in their head more, and then you'll understand it more. This just happened to me yesterday. Real time example. I did a mix and I made the drums sound a little bit deeper and punchier and fatter, some kind of doing my thing. And the producer, who's a friend, was like, I hear what you're doing. I know you carved out those mids, but I was going for a higher, more textured mid-range in sacrifice of some slap. So is there any way we can meet in the middle? I was going for more of like a Queen textured, we will rock you kind of thing. I was like, oh, yeah, I get that. Thank you for communicating that. And then on the next pass, we were dialed in, and now there's like tiny notes, and we're going to finish it today. It's like, oh, okay, we just communicated, but I didn't nail it on the first pass. I didn't not make a good mix. It was just, it wasn't right for what they were going for. It's that simple.
Right. And let's grab one. Go ahead.
No, I just like the communication. I like the collab. We've talked about this 100 times. I love the collaboration of mixing, and it's a dying part of the process, it seems, because like you either have to nail it or not. It's like, can we just get on the phone and talk? We get in the room. We get on FaceTime. It's this black box concept I've been talking about for years. It's like, the producers, the writers, and the artists are in the room making this thing, and you ship it off to some mixer that you never get to meet, and we're not getting, we're not a team member, we're not like considered, right? The mixer doesn't get credited a lot of times in the Instagram post because you just sent it to anybody. It's like, wait, what do you mean? Send it to someone you have a relationship with and is going to enhance this, someone you've spent time with, someone you get that gets you. It's the same thing. It's like when it comes to, oh, that's not what I was going for. It's like, well, if you knew me and I knew you, I'd probably understand what you were going for. And that mitigates that possibility of losing, for lack of better words, almost every time with a little bit of communication.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I actually, I didn't know we were going to run late, and I have someone coming for an attended session at 1:15, so I kind of have to hard out right now.
All good. We'll jump out. There's a couple more questions which I'll hit people in the DMs. Sorry for being late today, everybody, and John. But thank you as always for making the time.
Of course. Back to it next week. Can't wait.
Sounds good. Love you, John. Good to see everybody. I'm going to go jump on the Discord after.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.